On today's show, we'll be talking about ghosts, the smiling man, a guardian angel, and much more. All coming up on this episode of Paranormal Mysteries. Thank you all for joining me and welcome once again. I am your host, Nick Ryan. I hope everyone had a great weekend. And before we start, I'd like to say thank you to Chelsea and Mandy for their support and generosity. If you enjoyed the show, please remember to subscribe, share, and review the podcast. This supports us by helping new listeners to discover the show. And if you'd like to support us even further by becoming a patron or by donating, please visit us at patreon.com/paranormalmysteries or at buymeacoffee.com/paranormal. These links and others can be found in the show notes. And if you've encountered the paranormal and would like to share your story, please email me at paranormalmysteriespodcast@gmail.com. All experiences, no matter how big or small, are always welcome. And with that in mind, our first story comes to us from Francesca, and Francesca's story is called Late Night Babysitting. Francesca says, "Hello, Nick. I've never written into anything like this before, but hearing everyone else's stories has made me comfortable enough to share mine with you. This happened in 2013 in Southern California. My uncle called me and asked if I could watch my cousins while he took my aunt out on a date. At the time, my cousins were 15, 13, 8, and 6 years old. I thought it was weird that my teenager cousins couldn't watch over everything, but my uncle is kind of controlling, so it kind of made sense. He just didn't believe that they were responsible enough to take care of everything. So I agreed and drove over to watch them. I got there around 6 p.m., and my uncle gave me the lowdown of the house and told me to call him if anything happens. Soon after that, my aunt and uncle left for their date. I soon started to fix dinner for everyone, and we ended up eating together at about 7:30 p.m. After dinner, I told my little 8 and 6-year-old cousins to get ready for bed. I walked them upstairs to the bedroom, and they then brushed their teeth and changed into their PJs. Soon after that, I tucked them in and wished them a good night. I turned off their bedroom lights and shut their doors. I walked down the hall and turned the hall light off as well, and I walked downstairs to the living room. There, my 13 and 15-year-old cousins are sitting on the 2 of the 3 couches in the living room. So I sit on the couch that's unoccupied. Just to let you know, they are both teenage girls. So, as I was saying, we were sitting on 3 separate couches in the living room. The TV was on and we were watching Netflix. I've always loved the paranormal, so I suggested that we watched this paranormal show on Netflix. By this time, it's about 8 o'clock. My 15-year-old cousin didn't really care what we watched, but my 13-year-old cousin, on the other hand, was very apprehensive about watching the show. She told me that she can't do too much stuff like this, because it's just too real for her. I kind of laughed it off and told her, "Don't worry, we're all together and it'll be fine." She then begrudgingly agreed, and we watched the paranormal show. By about 10 p.m., my 15-year-old cousin fell asleep. I think she had been in a deep sleep because she was snoring really loud. I had to turn up the volume on the TV to hear the show because of it. After this, it was just me and my 13-year-old cousin who were still awake. We watched 2 more episodes together, and then she said that she couldn't watch the show anymore because it was freaking her out. So she just put her headphones on and listened to some music while scrolling through her cell phone. And by this time, it was midnight. I was a bit of a night owl at this time, so I was still awake, and I was slightly annoyed that my uncle and aunt were not back from their date yet. But there wasn't much I could do about that. I then realized that all the lights were on downstairs, so I then proceeded to turn them all off. Then I returned to the living room and continued to watch the paranormal show. At this time, the only light that could be seen was the glow from the large television. I watched 1 more episode, and I turned to notice that my 13-year-old cousin was now fast asleep. By this time, it was about 1 a.m. I myself started to feel a little bit sleepy, so I decided to turn the TV off and try to sleep on the couch. Let me describe the house a bit more for you, so you can get a feel for the layout. It was located in the hills away from any noise. This house was kind of old, and it had 2 stories, and the floors were all wooden, including the stairs and hallway. It was wintertime, so it was relatively cold by California standards. The living room was located by the front door of the house and the bottom of the stairs, and the house had good acoustics, so you could hear a lot from wherever you were, and this was only intensified by the quiet of the night. So like I was saying, all the lights and the TV were off. It was very dark and I couldn't see very far. I could only make out faint things in the pale light from the windows. I got comfortable on the couch and I tried to go to sleep. As I laid there, I heard the creaking of the house settling. I assumed the cold winter weather was making the old wood in the house expand, explaining the noises. I'm almost asleep when I hear loud creaking coming from upstairs. I then listened more, and I realized that it's footsteps coming from the hallway right above me upstairs. I first think it's one of my younger cousins walking to the bathroom, but I don't see the hall light turn on or hear the bathroom door open. The steps continue, and I try to figure out what's going on, and all of a sudden the steps then stop at the end of the hallway. At this time, I realize I haven't heard any of the bedroom doors open. I immediately start getting anxious, and just then the steps continue down the hall, this time slower, heavier, almost like they're dragging along the hallway. I then start to hear something faintly, like murmurs and sniffling. At this point, I'm kind of frozen, just listening, trying to stay calm. The steps slump their way to the other end of the hallway, and then stop. At this point, my heart is beating so hard, and the dragging steps continue back the other side of the hallway. But this time it's different. This time, I clearly hear what sounds like a woman crying, and she's crying a little louder every couple of steps. I'm officially starting to freak out at this time, and it dawns on me that I don't know what's up there, but I have to check and make sure that my little cousins are safe. I'm scared out of my mind, and the steps continue, and the cries become more and more audible. I can't seem to summon the strength to go upstairs by myself, so I quietly try to shake my 15-year-old cousin awake multiple times. She's still snoring and in such a deep sleep that I can't seem to wake her up. So I go next to my 13-year-old cousin on the other couch, and I try to wake her up. I shake her a few times, and slowly she wakes. Half awake, she asks me what's going on, and after she asks me that question, the steps upstairs completely stop, along with the loud crying. I feel like I'm going crazy as I scramble to tell her that I need her to help me check on the kids upstairs. She sounds confused but agrees, and I practically pull her arm off as we scurry to the light switches. I turn on the stair lights and we slowly go up the stairs. At this point, I think she notices that I'm truly frightened. I have no poker face, so it probably read loud on my face. She holds my hand as I flick on the hallway light. I look over the hall, but nothing is there. We walk to my 6- and 8-year-old cousins' rooms to check in on them. They're both fast asleep, none the wiser to all that I've heard. I make an audible sigh of relief, and we walk back down the hall. My 13-year-old cousin then reaches for the hallway light, and I quickly tell her to leave it on, in a very shaky voice. She looks at me and shrugs, and we walk down the stairs together, and she then tries to turn off the lights downstairs as well, but I quickly stop her. I can tell she knows that something's up. We walk back to the living room and sit down on the couch together. I am very uncomfortable, and I honestly just wanted to leave the house, but I had to stay until my uncle got back. My 13-year-old cousin sees that I'm still visibly upset and asks me what happened. I try to just downplay it, and I say that I thought I heard an animal or something upstairs in the hallway. I keep glancing at the stairs, half expecting the crying person to be there, and my cousin then stops me and asks what really happened. After gathering myself and sitting there quietly for a minute or two, I try to give her a warning that this sounds a little crazy. She says it's fine, and to just tell her already. I kind of stumble with my words, but I manage to get out that I swear that I heard someone walking back and forth upstairs, just crying loudly. She's quiet for a while and then laughs a little bit. She then proceeds to say very casually, "Oh, you mean the crying woman. You heard the crying woman." I'm floored. I'm like, "What?" And she proceeds to tell me that she sees her all the time, late at night. She told me I shouldn't be scared of her, that she doesn't hurt anyone. And my cousin continued saying this. All she does is walk up and down the hallway crying. She's lost somebody close to her, I kind of feel bad for her." This was strangely comforting for me to hear, and it was nice to know that at least I wasn't alone in my experience, that this was a real confirmed experience, and not just some weird delusion of mine. My cousin continued, saying that I should be glad that I didn't see the smiling guy. She said that she sees him outside of her bedroom window sometimes, and by the way, her bedroom is on the second floor. She said that all the smiling guy does is stare at you while smiling a wide and creepy grin. He never talks to her, but he definitely knows that she can see him. She told me that she feels that he's bad and that he wants inside the house, but can't come in for whatever reason. By this time, my jaw is to the floor, and she tells me that she sees spirits all the time, and that most of the time, they don't even acknowledge that she's there. She told me that she used to be terrified of them, but now she's kind of just getting used to it. I'm then quiet, trying to wrap my mind around what she's told me, when my uncle shows back up from his date. I hug my cousin goodbye, tell my uncle and aunt everything was fine, and I immediately drove home. They offered for me to spend the night, but I declined right away. Long story short, I never babysat for them again. Heck, I never even went back to that house again. I always liked paranormal stuff, and I still do, but it hits you a lot different when it's happening to you. I haven't had anything like this ever happen to me since, and this is forever burned into my memory. Thank you for letting me share my story. Our next story of the night comes to us from Gia, and Gia's story is called "My Dead Brother Visits and Protects Me." Gia says, "Hi Nick, I'm a relatively new listener to your podcast. I've been listening for about a week now and love binging it while I work. I've been contemplating sharing these two stories related to each other and decided to go for it. I know that several of your listeners have paranormal experiences related to dreams, and I haven't yet heard an episode that describes quite what I've experienced fully, but I'd love to know what any of your listeners think of it. Here is my first story. I never had paranormal experiences until I was 11 years old, but I always had a creative imagination. For example, my sister and I would blow bubbles at 6 a.m. when the sun rose, and we were convinced that the light reflected off of them were fairies. So when I first started having paranormal experiences, I thought they were just my imagination. When I was 11 years old, my family and I moved 8 hours away. After renting a house, we then bought one, as it was still being built. Thus, we were the first people to own or live in it. However, that house was very haunted, so we thought it was the land. A lot of crazy and scary things happened in that house, but I'll share those stories another time. But there was one very positive experience I had in that house, and that's what I want to share with you today. Before I was born, my mom had a miscarriage. She knew the baby was a boy and had already named him. I'll call him T in the story. My mom was so devastated when she lost him, and it took her a very long time to recover. And then, a little over a year later, she had me. I and my sister first learned about our would-have-been brother when I was about 9 years old, because my mom had another miscarriage. It saddened me, but I didn't think much of it. That was until we moved into that house. I don't remember when exactly it started, but in the house I began having vivid dreams of my would-have-been older brother, T. He always wore an orange t-shirt and jeans, had brown hair and blue eyes. He always looked about a year older than me, like he would have been in real life. He was never a baby in my dreams. It was as if he had aged with me. In the dreams, he would always appear to me in some random part of the house as I went about my day. I'd get super excited to see him again. I'd take his hand and lead him to my parents. I was the only one who could see him in my dreams, until I said, "Mom, Dad, it's your son, T. He's visiting us from heaven." Then, everyone in our family could see him. In the dreams, we'd simply perform everyday simple tasks. We'd play in my parents' garden, run around outside, play hide-and-go-seek, etc. They were never bad dreams, but always realistic and calming, and I loved dreaming of him. This was a very, very big contrast from the dreams I'd usually have in that house. The dreams of T came in between nightmares of seeing myself being brutally murdered, dragged into hell, or seeing it happening to others. It was as if T was intervening and came to give me nights of peace when he knew I was having such terrible nightmares. Eventually, we moved out of that house when I was almost 13. We'd moved into an apartment, and the dreams followed me there. But just before my 13th birthday, that changed. I had a dream of T, and everything was going as usual until I walked around the corner of the hallway, and from the corner of my eye, I saw him sitting in the dark on my parents' bed. I came in, and he looked very sad. His head was hanging, and his eyes were looking at the floor. I sat next to him and asked what was wrong. He then looked at me and said, "I have to go back to heaven now." My dreams never ended like that. I simply woke up. But after he said that, I knew he meant that he wasn't going to be able to come back anytime soon. I called in my parents, and we all said goodbye to him. I then woke up with tears running down my cheeks. Sure enough, I never had another dream of T again, and honestly, I had kind of forgotten about them, until a few months ago. I teared up at the memories, and wished that he'd visit me again. I am 19 now, so it had been almost 6 years. At that time, I was dealing with a lot of anxiety and terrible nightmares. I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder a few years ago, so periods of intense anxiety and restlessness are quite normal for me. I was having dreams of my family suddenly hating me, losing everyone I loved, and ending up alone. It got to the point where I woke up with an intense migraine almost every morning from stress during the night, and it began affecting my ability to focus at work. In December 2020, just a few days before the new year, I happened to stumble across a YouTube video from one of my favorite paranormal creators about spiritual warfare. I then decided that no matter what, I would enter 2021 in a state of extreme peace. I didn't know how, since usually these periods of terror would just have to stop on their own, but I had faith that they would be gone soon. Then came December 31st, 2020, New Year's Eve. I fell asleep around 12 a.m. and had another dream of my family, but this time it was peaceful. Instead of screaming, we were playing board games, eating our favorite foods, listening to music, and laughing at memories. I was aware in my dream that this was a very big difference from the dreams I've been having about my family lately, and was extremely excited. After noticing it, I looked to the corner of my living room in the dream, and that's when I saw T standing there with a smile on his face, and he said, "You can't say I haven't visited you in 6 years anymore." That was all he said, before disappearing from the dream, and it continued on in a peaceful manner. The next morning, I woke up feeling fully rested and in a very calm state of mind. That day, as I scrolled through YouTube, I watched the same creator I'd seen earlier talking about spiritual warfare. The video was about how her deceased grandfather came to her in her dreams, and even visited her daughter, and how he is their guardian angel. Tears then filled my eyes as I came to the realization that T was the sign that I needed to know that I would enter 2021 in peace. It's now February 2nd as I'm writing this, and I haven't had another one of my stressful dreams since December 2020. However, I have had one paranormal dream in January, but I felt T protecting me from it. And that's my second story. A few weeks ago, I was having a relatively normal dream. It was weird, but most dreams are. It was nothing scary until I reached the end. I was suddenly in my great-grandmother's house, who had passed away about 5 years ago. I heard my family talking in the kitchen, and I was in her bedroom, so I walked out to go meet them. As soon as I entered the kitchen, my family all looked at me. I suddenly began twisting my body in very unnatural shapes. I began hissing and crawling on the ground. My family kept yelling at me, asking what was going on. I then looked at them and said, "I possessed Becky." Side note, I have no idea who Becky is, or why I said this in my dream. The whole time I was trying so hard to stop myself in the dream and trying to wake up, but the most disturbing part is that I woke up right as I said this and found myself leaning over the side of the bed, propped up on my elbows, whispering, "I possessed Becky." I remember being so panicked as I tried my hardest to stop whispering, but I couldn't. As soon as the words left my mouth, I threw myself out of that position and lied flat on my back. That's when I swear I thought I saw a black figure in my bedroom doorway, but as soon as I looked at it, it disappeared. I didn't know this, but my little sister had climbed into bed with me while I was asleep. I was whispering so loudly that I woke her up. I was terrified to go back to sleep, but suddenly I realized that I had forgotten to take off my cross before going to bed. I wear my grandmother's cross necklace nearly every day, and the only time I don't is if I forget to put it on. However, I always take it off at night because I get paranoid that I'll somehow choke on the chain in my sleep. But for whatever reason, I'd forgotten to take it off that night. I held it in my hands, and then thoughts of T being with me flooded into my mind, and an overwhelming sense of peace came over me. A few minutes later, I was back asleep and woke up feeling calm the next morning. Thank you so much for reading my story. I didn't expect it to end up being this long. I hope you and the listeners enjoy it. And if anyone has experienced something similar to me, I'd love to hear from them. Have a fantastic week. Gia. As we come to the end of tonight's episode, I'd like to say thank you to all of you for tuning in, and a special thank you goes out to Francesca and Gia for sharing their experiences. If you've witnessed something that you can't explain, please contact me at paranormalmysteriesPodcast@gmail.com or visit paranormalmysteriespodcast.com and click on the Tell Your Story link. All of our contact information can be found in the show notes. Until next time, I hope you all have a safe and healthy beginning to your week, and we'll see you back here on Wednesday with our next episode. From everyone at Paranormal Mysteries, thank you for listening, and please remember, don't wait for the unknown to come to you. Get out there and find it.